Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So a very warm welcome to all of you today, and today's speaker is Geetanjali. Let me just share a few lines of introduction. So Geetanjali is a lifelong student of Sri Aurobindo and Mother, and with all the teachings and learnings and imbibings that she gets from the learnings and the words of Mother and Sri Aurobindo, he is also a founder and CEO of Himalayan Institute of Alternatives Ladakh and Transform India initiative. So where she tries to work on the level of system change. I think it's a very courageous process. All of us are mostly afraid of transforming the systems. So really looking forward to how to really bring it to our life, the words of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Yeah, over to you, Geetanjali.
Thank you, Monica, and good evening, everybody. When James first asked me if I would like to speak in these series on healing, I thought I may not be the right or the best person to speak on this because I'm not a doctor by profession, or I've not been researching into healing per se. But then I thought that I may not be the worst person either, because I did run a hospital for 5 years, and I saw that side of the story. And I have been a student of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo from the tender age of 16, and I have tried to, imbibe their teachings in most aspects of my life, including healing. And so I thought that, maybe I could share with you some of the learnings that I've had along the way. But today when I was thinking of what I should speak to you, and I saw some of the comments in the WhatsApp chat, I was thinking that it may not be a bad idea if we make it an interactive session, because as James said, this is the 9th session. So most of the content on healing must have been shared with you by now. And, one of you also mentioned about this book, Integral Healing, that you've read and you wanted to discuss. So I was thinking, instead of it being a one-way street of me talking, why not we switch on our cameras, keep the mics mute, and then maybe make it an interactive session. What do you say?
Yes, sure. Let's go.
Because this university or institute that we are setting up at Himalayan in Ladakh is all about very, it's a doers university. It's an experiential university where we work with the students. So I was thinking that we just bring in that concept of a flipped classroom here, where given the fact that you may have had a lot of content already, let us just have fun, discuss, because I think healing best happens in joy and cheerfulness in the atmosphere, where there is. So, any thoughts? I think it would be good to switch on our cameras and please tell me what you've heard so far. What is it that has struck you? And then we can take it up from there. Or if there is any genuine question, we can start that as a trigger point and take it up from there. Sophie or Claudia, your cameras are on. Thank you. Sharda, would you like to start? Like, what has been your takeaways so far? You can unmute yourself, Sophie.
Good afternoon, good morning. The best thing that I heard was stay within. And I really like that, because it's all about really shifting consciousness from up there to within.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think that could be the starting point of the discussion today, because as I said, I ran a hospital for 5 years and I saw the other aspect, from outside to inside. Medication is about physical, trying to heal through physical means, where from an outside you bring it to inside, whereas what you said, living within, is curing from inside to outside. So that is the opposite way. And the mother says that, I think Sri Aurobindo says that this whole paradigm shift that happened in the last 200 years may take a long time to reverse into self-cure, because this whole narrative of medicine as something that brings wellness has been dinned into us for the last 200 years. Whereas wellness is the other way around. In fact, it is not medicine, but it is something else that cures, which medicines in fact trigger. The belief that yes, we will be fine if we eat this medicine is what triggers wellness, is what triggers cure. So you're very right that it starts from living within. And basically, when we say healing, we presume that something in us is broken or unwell, So it is good to start with that definition of what is illness. And in very simple terms, Mother has said that illness is nothing but a disequilibrium in the body. It is a disharmony of the body. And what do we mean by disharmony? When we read the planes and parts of the being, what Sri Aurobindo has mentioned, like we are not just this body. There are many layers and layers of our being, and all these layers have different rates of progress, different openness to receptivity. Some are very far ahead, some are lagging behind, and this disharmony. For instance, I may be having a lot of faith in the heart or trust in the heart, but I may have a lot of fear in the body about anything. And this is what is disharmony, and this is what creates illness. And what triggers this disharmony? There are a lot of factors. Primarily, it's psychological factors. All along, modern medicine presumes that there are symptoms, and medication can provide a relief or cure, but actually it is not a cure, it is just a symptomatic relief which is very localized, but it does not take care of the cause, and the cause is in most cases either psychological or mental or from the subconscious. Now, what could be psychological causes? There is a beautiful work done by Louisa Hay. She talks about, there is a book by her called Heal Your Body, where she talks about psychological reasons of all the physical illnesses, where she tries to prove that all diseases are psychosomatic, that it is psychological issues that trigger physical problems. And so we may take all the medicines in the world, but unless that cause is cured, we will keep having those present themselves in some way or the other. And these psychological reasons could be, it starts from maybe the first and the foremost is, next to disharmony, is fear. This whole fear of many things that have been fed into us. Like for instance, we are still going through, and we just went through COVID, remember? And how all of us were absolutely stuck in our homes, how we feared even if somebody sneezed next to us, instead of saying God bless you, we were cursing that why is this person sneezing, So the fear was, and rightly so, because a lot of deaths have happened. And but when a similar pandemic happened, when the mother was in Japan, she writes about it, that the primary cause of it was fear. So when the pandemic just started, I went through, normally I have this habit that whenever there is an issue to be resolved, I look it up in Mother and Sri Aurobindo, that what do they have to say. So when I read this, And I thought to myself that yes, this is fear, and I decided to not have this fear. And would you believe it if I told you that in the last 1.5 years, when the whole world has been shut in their houses, I was checking my boarding passes, and I have close to 25 to 30 boarding passes, out of which some 10 or 12 were of travels abroad. I was in the US and also within India, with just this feeling that no fear, at the same time not to be very lax about it, not to be not careful about it, but not to have this unnecessary fear. And I did have COVID once, because we were in a community living, and the cook had it, and we were forced to get ourselves checked, but it was absolutely asymptomatic. It was like a nice 14-day holiday, I thought, to quarantine when you had. So there were no symptoms at all. So it really works, this absolute lack of fear. And mother says again and again about this not fearing it. So one of the most important psychological cause to cure is this fear. The other one is having a weak nervous envelope. So we just don't have this physical, we have a subtle physical around it. It is called the nervous envelope. And before the germ enters the body, it has to go through that sheath, the subtle physical sheath. And mother says that the sheaths which are strong and very well formed, they resist this disease, the microbes to enter. And what causes this sheath to be healthy is trust in the divine, is joy, cheerfulness, absolute trust and faith in the will of the divine, and so on, confidence. And what makes this sheath weak are all the negative emotions like depression, discouragement. All of this actually makes the sheath weak. So you might have seen that two people may go to the same restaurant or to the same place, and one comes back with some disease, the other is fine. So it was not the external factors. External factors do impact, but the ground for the disease is made by this internal state, psychological state, which reflects in the nervous envelope being weak or strong. So this is the other psychological thing which makes it weak. And the third is that mentally, when we start imagining all kinds of consequences, imagination is a very powerful weapon we have. It's a very powerful tool that we have. We can use it both to make a beautiful life for ourselves, and we can also use it to our detriment. So whenever we catch a little cold, we suddenly have this all kinds of anxieties and what will happen to me and so on. So these are some of the things which lead to psychological causes of diseases. At this point, I will maybe invite your comments. Is this your experience as well? Saurav?
Hi, ma'am. Yeah. I was just wondering, like, when you were explaining these things, how can we go about measuring someone's psychological state? Or, for example, one may feel that he or she is perfectly healthy, but there may be some underlying issues with psychological or nervous envelope. So how do we know? How do we go about identifying such issues?
So a healthy psychological state is when you are looking forward to life, you are full of confidence, trust in the divine, there is cheerfulness. Mother has talked about a lot of these positive psychological qualities. When there is an absolute lack of fear, when the mind is always thinking of luminous, beautiful things, and it is not, that trying to be happy on the surface and hiding something. Not that. I'm not talking about the self-image that you're portraying. I'm talking about real positivity. So that is the, it's psychological happiness. You're not unduly anxious. Your heartbeat is normal. Your breathing is normal. And we know when we are scared or angry or upset or fear or so. So that is the cause. Now we will come to the cures. What are the various cures that are available, right? So if psychological issue is the cause, then how can just a physical pill help? So what a physical pill basically does are two things. One is it either cut the link between the brain that perceives the pain and the organ of pain. Most of these painkillers work that you don't feel the pain, but actually the body does all the healing, right? Or it works as a placebo, where you start believing that because I have seen this doctor and because I have had this medicine, it's going to cure me. But the truth is that it is that faith that the body starts to have after that cures you. So one is this medical things which cure, but then if we take the example of Michael Jackson, for instance, right? You must be knowing that he had a lot of doctors, all kidney specialists and all heart specialists on standby. But then Michael Jackson lived for only 50 years. So what does this show? I mean, if medical science is what could give people long life, then he should have lived for at least 100 years. And I have been to Okinawa, where I have seen that people live till about 80 or 90 or even 100. It is considered the island of octogenarians and so on. And I don't think they have this medical support systems as much as they are living their purpose. So when people are living their purpose happily, or if there is something to do and they are psychologically happy, then that leads to healing and long life, right? So the first thing is to have a purpose in life where there is something to get up in the morning and look forward to. Progress. Progress is one thing that always results in well-being and wellness. And we have to move from healing, the concept of healing, not from a curative point of view. It's not about curing after we've fallen sick, but preventing to fall sick altogether. Right? And that is where purpose helps. We've seen, writers like Barbara Cartland, they were writing till their 90th year, and they were in full possession of their faculties. This in the ashram we had Amal Kiran, whom I knew very closely, and he passed away at the age of 100 or 2 or 3, and he was editing Mother India till he was 99, 100 and so on. So purpose is one thing that gives us wellness. The other thing is when we are connected inwardly with what we call the psychic being. Psychic being is a part in us which gives us the experience of eternity. It is that part in us which is the source of all sweetness and strength, and it does exist in us. It is in another dimension. It is not in the three-dimensional body, but it is the size of a thumb in the 4th dimension. And living in the psychic being is the next step towards healing and health, because it has true discernment. It guides you. So you might have seen that animals have a better instinct in many things. They would not eat a food that is rotten or something that is not good for them, because their instinct tells them not to do it. But the mentality of the mind, which man has developed, which is his strength in a way, because it gives him reason, but it also gives rise to a lot of ideas of what is good, what is bad, which disconnects him from the instinct of the body. So the psychic being, when we live in it, it automatically takes us to that point where we are discerning. It makes us live in harmony with our being inwardly and harmony with nature. And as we spoke, that the cause of illness is disequilibrium and the remedy is this harmony. Harmony of all the parts of our being around this psychic being, which is the highest part in us and which is forever eternal and young. If we start living our lives from this point and organize our mind, life and body around it, it automatically leads to healing and wellness. Maybe again we'll stop here and ask if somebody has something to add. I would not like it to be a one-way thing, because Lotus, I see you smile.
I do smile because I come here to listen to you.
Yeah, Geetanjali.
Yes.
So,
Yes, Monica.
would you say that there is a connection or an kind of an enmeshing between living out our purpose and following the psychic being? Because the way you are explaining it seems like they're highly interlinked, as if it's maybe one thing altogether. So Mother also shares that an aimless life is a miserable life, and no wonder that most of us live a life of misery most often than not. And it's beautiful if one can slowly find or stumble upon a purpose to life, which gives this kind of I think a propulsion to live, as you were saying, to look forward to life. So one thing would you say that there is a connection between this? And the other thing is that from your previous early talk, the first half that you shared, you were talking about two people eating the same food and one getting sick and maybe the other not so sick, or maybe totally escaping the disease. So there I also feel that there is some part in us which is almost always ready to fall sick, as if it's wanting attention all the time. And in my experiences also, I have realized that once I'm conscious of maybe something hitting me, maybe a cold or a cough or anything, and if I inwardly say to myself that I really don't want this time, I think it really changes the course of the disease. So either it becomes highly mild, or maybe one day a hit and then I'm okay again. So if you would like to say something there also.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So now let's go more into what is this harmony. Okay, so there is something called the divine will, right? The divine has created this world and it is all going as per the will of the divine, and there is an individual will. Okay, so I have an individual will. So disease and death happens when my individual will is not aligned to the divine will. And why does that happen? Because what I call myself I is the false I. It is the ego I. But this psychic being is the true I. And the psychic being is automatically, it is by nature aligned with the divine will. So the mother says that the first step in Sri Aurobindo's yoga is psychicization. It is catching hold of that true self in us, because that self is automatically aligned with the will of the divine and takes us in a flow that is meant for us. And it's only when we go away from the flow that is meant for us because of three things: ego, desire, and attachment. These are the three largest obstacles. In the Vedas also talk about the panis, the dasyus, and the so on. So ego, desire, and attachment are actually pertaining to the three parts of our being. Attachment is the limitation of the physical, because we are attached to our comfort zones. We do not want to move out. Okay. Desire pertains to the vital being, the desire, and ego pertains to the mental being. So these three are the things which keep us bound in our lower nature and do not allow us to align with the divine will. But the psychic being in us is what is aligned to it. And if we operate from there, then half the problems are solved actually. It will instinctively tell us what to eat, what not to eat, what to do, what not to do. Which doctor to go to, which doctor not to go to. Which thing to... You will have a feeling of certitude, that this is what I have to do. And you do it. So, healing starts with first being one with the divine, okay, with the psychic, and that is what Sophie was saying. Begin to live within. And the second thing is that this is beginning to live within is a long process. You can't just start living in the psychic being right from today, right? So what do we have at our disposal? The highest instrumentation is the mind, is the reason. So that's where you said. And that's where it comes in. It's like when the teacher is not yet come to the classroom, there's a monitor who handles the class, and does not let the kids to run or I. And that class monitor is the mental reason. So, and this reason can work on our psychology and on the fear of our body. Like for instance, how do you handle, suppose you are about to catch a cough, so you have a choice there, right? You can either fall in despair, or remember the past habit that last time so-and-so when I caught a cold, it went to fever and then I was sick for 15 days. Oh my God, what will happen now? And then suddenly you will catch it and you will go through the same course of the disease as it's called. But if you use your reason, which is the enlightened part, and say that, no, I stop it here. I do not want this cough. And, and call the peace. So, call the peace of the divine with an absolute trust in the divine. And I can tell you from experience that it gets averted. It gets averted significantly. I mean, something which would have maybe resulted in hospitalization can just pass off by a day or two of sneezing, So we use that highest aspect of our being, the reason, to talk to our psychological part, our vital, and our physical. Because they are like children, and this one is like the class teacher, is like the monitor. And you can definitely avert the disease. And the second thing is to remain absolutely calm in the face of it. So I am a black belt in karate, and we do a lot of sparring. And I can tell you from experience that when you are sparring, sometimes you get hugely bruised. And I've had occasions where my leg muscle was like swollen like this, But then if you do, oh my God, what will happen? It really deteriorates. But because you've been hurt many times, the body has learned that it will eventually get cured. What's the big deal in it? So right from the start, not paying too much attention to the problems of the body and, keeping the mind off it by doing other things, carrying on life as usual. I'm not saying drag the body or, if it is unwell, but not to unnecessarily want that attention and just, lie down on the bed, but carry on with your life as usual and you will see miraculously it heals much faster. So, and that kind of trust, again, that kind of faith, that kind of calm comes when one is again in touch with the psychic. Because the psychic gives rise to two things. One is equanimity in the face of, so it is like a nice virtuous cycle. When you're practicing equanimity, you enhance the growth of the psychic, and when the psychic comes forward, there'll be more and more equanimity. So it's a virtuous circle. And it is this very equanimity and peace that brings the divine grace to come and work when we have an illness also. That calm, that quietude. And the second thing which a psychic living gives is remember and offer. At every moment, when we remember and offer to the divine, it actually, the pain kind of almost disappears. And I'll give you an example that I was telling you that I bought a hospital and I was running it. So as the chairperson of the hospital, I would go on rounding every day. I would round on all the patients. And because I was not trained to be a doctor, because when you are a doctor and you have seen hundreds and thousands of patients, you have developed that immunity to most of the diseases. But because I was not from that background, I would catch lots of problems, lots of diseases from the patients. So I'll talk about one incident when I caught chickenpox. I caught chickenpox at the age of 40 or 42 I was. Generally you have chickenpox as a child and then you just have the immunity. And I even had these, those things, those irritable, what are they called? Those boil-like things. I even had it on my eyes here. So every time I would blink, I could feel that I'm blinking. It was that painful. But I had just come back from a 10-day course in Vipassana. And one of the things Vipassana teaches you is what Sri Aurobindo talks about in Synthesis of Yoga, where he says release from the subjection to the body, that chapter, and release from the heart and mind. So when the Prakriti and Purusha are separated, and the Purusha, the witness consciousness or the psychic being, can see the Prakriti as we look at actors on the stage, or on a movie screen, where we are free to, identify with them, but we are also free to use our reason and say that, okay, this is a movie that I'm watching. So that's what Vipassana teaches you, how to separate the Purusha and the Prakriti. And I had just come back from a 10-day Vipassana, and I decided to put that into practice. And you won't believe it, those 21 days were like a breeze. It was the finest holiday I've had. Chickenpox, can you imagine? And I read that book, Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. It's a very thick book with very small print. But I was quarantined in a room and I read it for 21 days. And I haven't had a better experience than that. While if you look at it, and if any of you have had chickenpox, you know how painful it can be. So when we are in this state of equanimity and we can separate the body from our consciousness, and we can separate the psychological aspects, a vital from ourselves, and look at it dispassionately. And body is like a child. You tell it, don't fear. The vital is like a teenager, running amok, and you have to tell it, don't worry. And the mind is like an adult with all the reasons and all. You have to tell it, hold on, you don't need to worry and all that. And you separate from it, you very much ease the healing process. You actually kind of help in a faster healing. So Mother talks about these 4 steps to healing. The first, she says, is that just dissociate your mind from that part which is paining. And she gives the example of even toothache, which is the most difficult to bear because it's closest to the brain. She says even toothache, the first is to dissociate. The second is to distract yourself and do other things, be actively engaged. And that's when we come to this whole thing of progressive life. Keep at your work that you love doing and not think about it. Third is to be calm and to call that help. Basically, an absolute equanimity. And fourth is calling the divine grace or the spiritual force. There are many occult methods also which Mother has talked about, but maybe that needs a guru to learn how to do it. For instance, she says you can lie down in a place and pull your consciousness to a level and go out of your body and then try to put the consciousness into the body from above, from outside of the body. But these are many spiritual methods, but I think we need to either grow into that or we need to learn it. But even otherwise, even if we don't go into this thing, if we psychologically call for help and for the divine grace, then help comes. But the divine grace also needs, though it is unconditional and it can come to anybody, but it can be helped to come if there is ground of equanimity and trust and surrender and faith in the Divine Mother. And it can be and imagination can be used to visualize as oneself healthy again. Mother has given a lot of examples that people were losing a lot of hair, but they started going into the mirror and saying that I'm growing hair. When we start losing hair, we come into this fear, that what will happen, I'll grow bald and so on, and then actually that happens. But Mother says if you go and you actually visualize, imagine with the faith that you're growing hair, they actually start coming back. So this is how we can make conditions ready. And while microbes and all that modern science and modern medicine talks about is true, but microbes are not the cause of illness. The cause is our psychological state. Right now in my gut, there might be millions of bacteria already, There might be in my body billions of all kinds of microbes. But we don't fall sick, right? It is not the microbes that make us fall sick. But when we create conditions for the microbes to act by our state of anxiety, stress, fear, cut off from the divine grace, not having a sufficient deeper inner life, not having a purpose in life, that is when we create conditions for the body to fall sick. So Monica, does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in complete resonance with what you were sharing. Thank you so much.
So we might have seen that this craving for health hasn't been more prominent than it is now in the 21st century, So while it has resulted in longevity, by taking pills and medication, but even the incidence of disease has increased manifold. It is because our exclusive reliance on these physical, pills and physical methods for longevity and youth and wellness. So now more and more science is talking about the relationship between mind and matter, about things being psychosomatic. And I will quickly share a screen, and I think that will help understand this completely, that what do we mean by inner life. Sophie, you spoke about inner. So inner can be many things in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. So I will just share my screen so that I will explain to you what could be inner. So here is share. So this is a diagram which is what best describes Indian psychology. Okay. So this is our ego here, and this is our physical. So today, this medical science today only recognizes the causes to be this physical, the symptoms as these physical, and it has the medication it gives is this physical. But when we say inner, it could mean this whole thing, the rest of it. And what is it? So very recently, medical science has started recognizing that how emotions and mind can start impacting matter. So that is the very outer of the inner. Okay, so this also impacts this physical. And then there is this subliminal self we have, inner physical, inner vital, inner mental, which is cosmic. It is universal. These are universal planes. So we can even station ourselves here. This is our subtle physical, or here, and then we can have higher mastery over this physical, because many of these things not only come through this and this, but also through here. And then there is this psychic being which we spoke about, which is the inmost being. And if we are stationed here, it helps healing, because this throws its light upon all this. And then you have this higher range, right from higher mind to illumined mind. And we can even be stationed in these stages. And this also impacts our health. So what we call healing and health is actually impacted by all these states of being, which we are absolutely ignorant of. And yoga is nothing but understanding these different planes and parts of the being, understanding how to gain access to these, and understanding how to transform and purify our being with the help of the psychic entity within, higher states here. So just to know that, and then there is always this inconscient and subconscient. And so subconscient is a very big cause of diseases. And the way it can be handled is that to be aware of suggestions that are coming from subconscient, and then trying to make them conscious. So when we say inner, what we mean are all of these things. All this is inner. Inner and superconscient, subliminal, and all of that. And in planes and parts of the being in Letters on Yoga, Sri Aurobindo gives us, details of how to work on these things. And you would be very surprised to know that when Sri Aurobindo was working, writing letters to his disciples, he got an offer to become the President of India. And he declined, obviously, the offer. And he said, but how can I explain to these people that writing letters to my disciples is far more important than becoming the President of India? Because his letters are like a manual for us. It's like a map in the virgin forest, which he and mother went for the first time to find that source of immortality. The highest healing is this becoming immortal, not having death. Mother says that death is a bad habit. It's just that we haven't learned to live properly. That aging is a myth, she says, and death is a bad habit. And if we learn how to live, then we won't die. And the highest healing is to conquer death. And Mother and Sri Aurobindo actually went through that virgin forest. And what they have written is a manual for us to follow. And that is why Sri Aurobindo said that how can I tell them that writing letters to my disciples is more important? Because he was paving, he was hewing the way to immortality through those letters. And any serious sadhak can find tremendous help in those letters. We have 8 minutes. I would like to have some reactions from some of you. So I had done a 5-day session on aging is a myth and dying a bad habit with James and Nama. And it is available on YouTube. I'll request James to share those recordings with you. It takes you step by step from where we are today in the physical to how to reach this stage of, because I believe that complete healing is only possible when you realize the supermind. There is no other healing possible. And so these series of talks talk about how we can access those regions of our being, which leads us to healing.
Really helpful, ma'am. Like it kind of, I mean, we have the belief, yeah, I mean, we can heal ourselves by connecting with internally. It's just a matter of, I guess, practice and connecting internally. So whenever we hear you guys sharing your experiences, it really increases the belief that, yeah, means we can do it.
Like I'll be turning 50 next year, and I always like to work on the path showed by Mother Ishwar Bindu, because one of the first step is this constant youth. She says, youth that never ages. And Auroville is a place for that, youth that never ages. And then she says, progress is the only way that you stay young. Because the day you stop progressing, you start moving towards aging, and aging is related to diseases and death. So how to be that youth that never ages is a constant search that I have. And it's up to you guys to say that if actually I have succeeded in not looking 50. I would like to believe that. And I don't know if it must have been just pure grace, but ever since I have actively started following this for the last 4 years, I haven't fallen sick a single day in the last 4 years. Even when this COVID was happening and I was tested positive, it was completely asymptomatic.
Following
and
in the last 4 years?
Not fallen sick, not fallen ill.
No,
even one.
Following since last 4 years. You've been
The
following.
things that I shared with you now, like living, trying to live in your deepest inner being and psychic, and reliance on the mother, no fear, and like at the age of 45, I relocated to Ladakh, which is at -20 in winters. And many people, even when they go for like a 2-week holiday, they're scared about lack of oxygen and so on. So this mantra that just throw fear out of your life from the mother, if it is followed, she says it is a precondition for integral yoga, lack of fear, and also for staying healthy. But that does not mean not wearing a mask or not being careful, for instance. But it is not having that confidence that you will be fine and you will be taken care of. Many people, the moment they reach 40, they already start feeling that they have become old. And just to prove that this aging is just a thing, is a number, at the age of 35, when ballerinas retire, I started learning ballet. Because to test what mother has written, that physical is very plastic, we just condition it with our mind, but it is a very faithful instrument, and at any age you can do anything. So I picked up the most difficult thing at the age of 35, which is Russian ballet, Bolshoi, where you dance on point shoes. And within 2 years, I went on to dancing on point shoes, and I did a full split. So I can tell you from experience that you can, the body can be molded as per your imagination. It is just that your, mind and all should not be prejudiced and stop it. So it is freeing the mind, freeing the psychological aspects of fear, having this full confidence, going your path, happy with a purpose in life. That's all. It's very simple, integral yoga.
What was the name of the book you mentioned in the beginning, where there is a link given with all the physical problems with psychological issues?
Yeah, it is a very interesting book, and I would recommend everybody to read it. It is called Louisa Hay's Heal Your Body. So I was introduced to this book about 20 years ago, and it talks about, and before accepting the book, I looked at all the diseases and the people in my life who had those, and the psychological things she mentioned actually matched those people, Like for instance, I would not like to go but for instance, if you have diabetes, so diabetes is inability to retain sugar in the body, and the psychological cause is a lot of bitterness in life, because all of us, life takes us through many experiences, and some of us come out in flying colors, but some of us become cynics or become bitter. And when we become bitter, we cannot retain sweetness in the body, and so it manifests as diabetes, where the sugar is not assimilated in the body but goes into the bloodstream and urine. And when I saw a lot of my friends and relatives who had diabetes, I did see that there was lack of gratitude for what is happening, and there was a lot of bitterness about how certain things haven't worked out. And from that day, 20 years ago, the way I've brought up my son also, he's 20 now, whenever we have some issues, we go through that list, find out the psychological reason, and try to first resolve that psychological reason. And slowly things go away, actually.
Can you repeat the name, please, of the author?
It is called Heal Your Body by Louisa Hay.
Okay, thank you.
So there are some quick questions. I think we don't have time. James, do we have like completely a minute or two?
Yes, if people want to ask questions, please step forward. We have time. We're flexible here.
Yes, I agree with you, Claudia, that most old people are beautiful. It is not about old as not being beautiful, but in our yoga, of integral yoga, of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, we are trying to work on how, on the supramental body, like we have a human body now. The next step is the supramental body, and supramental body by definition will not age, because it would have a substance. It's a very deeper philosophy and we don't have time for it, but Satchidananda, the Sat, which is the substance or the reality, it becomes through many gradations and it becomes this physical. Okay. And today the physical body that we have is prone to disease, decay and death. And what the Mother and Sri Aurobindo want to do is to have mastery over these three: disease, decay and death. So when we are coming from that angle, and it is not like for today or tomorrow to be achieved. Even after the supramental force was descended, Mother said it would take us 3,000 years, or it can be so. But that is the goal actually. That is the goal. When she says that aging is a myth. Yeah. So Shreya has asked if we can suggest some ways to develop faith in the body over time. It is this whole process, in the very cells we have to develop faith. And as I said, we have to start from where we are conscious. For instance, we have a mind and we have reason there. So we start with faith in the mind. And then we find out a psychic being and we have faith in the psychic. And then when we don't go looking for diseases, but when we fall sick, we can use that time to attain equanimity and direct that light into the cells of the body and the faith. And one of the ways you would know that faith is increasing is that you would not become anxious over day-to-day things. You would know that there is a force that is carrying you through. And there are these 4 lines in a poem of Amal Kiran, which I always remember, and that helps me to stay in that right state. Precious each moment laid in your hands, whatever the hue it bears, a flame and fragrance just because your fingers hold it dear. So the person is telling the divine that precious each moment laid in your hands, that if I remember you and if I know that you are there, it is precious as it is, whatever the hue it bears. Whether I'm successful or failure, or I'm healthy or I'm ill, it is precious because I've offered it to you. A flame and fragrance just because your fingers hold it dear. And Krishna says in the Gita that the past, present and future are all in me. I'm not looking for any result. We are all the time fretting and anxious about results. But he's saying the future is in me, so I'm not waiting for any result. All I'm looking for is you working by surrendering yourself to me, by remembering me in all actions. So the 2 mantras which can really help us is equanimity, being equal in the face of everything, and remember and offer. So thank you for being with me on this journey. And it is a beautiful journey, and there is no destination actually. So the journey is the destination.
Thank you so much, Geetanjali. It's a wonderful session. Sorry, I was coming in and out all the time because I had very big connection problems all throughout. But what I picked up was really beautiful, very helpful, very insightful. So I think we're all graced to have this session, and look forward to reuniting with you again soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Geeta.
Thank you. Bye.
God bless you.